Hello, I'm Brandon.
Hello, I'm Mason. This
And
is the first installment of the FishMoney podcast.
yeah, fish money, fish money. What does that mean, Mason? What is the point of this fish money podcast?
Well, in the Bible, I really should have the address right here, but I don't. In the Bible, the Pharisees come and want Jesus to pay the temple tax. They say, "Why don't your disciples and you pay the temple tax?" And Jesus says, Jesus doesn't like the traditions that the people set up, but he wants to honor them anyway. He said, "So we don't offend them, Peter, go and catch a fish and then reach into the fish's mouth and you'll find the money for our temple tax." So it's not overtly it's not to be overtly Christian. It's just to say we're looking for valuable things in unexpected places. It came, and I know that's not the point of the Bible passage, but the point is there's money in the fish and no one expected that. So we're looking for valuable things in unexpected places.
Looking for the money in the fish.
The money in the fish.
I'm going to take up fishing now. And so today we're talking about horror movies.
Yes.
But real quick, Mason, what is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie, I remember when I don't think I can really pick, but I remember going to see How to Train Your Dragon and getting out of the movie theater and just thinking about how awesome it was and how cool it was. So that's the best answer I've got. I'm not much of a movie buff.
That's okay. My favorite movie is Jurassic Park. It can sometimes fall under the subgenre in horror called creature features. But I've loved Jurassic Park literally my entire life. It came out 5 days before I was born. So
really,
yeah,
that's cool.
June 10th, 1993. So,
it's pretty good CGI for 93.
Yeah, it was revolutionary CGI. It's so good. But we're talking about horror movies and what is good, what is bad, and what you should think about if you choose or want to consider watching them. We know the Bible does depict a lot of terrible, horrible, disgusting things. So Mason, what's the difference between reading the Bible and studying it and watching a horror movie?
Right. So the Bible is a historical text lots of times. The really horrific things that you find are either prophecy, like in Revelation, and those are all very vague. But in the Old Testament, we have specific, gory, terrible things that happened because it's recorded as history. The difference between the Bible here and a horror movie is that most horror movies are not recording history for people to know and understand. They're doing all the gore and stuff because they want to watch it and they want other people to watch it. So they're inflicting this on themselves instead of dealing with the harsh realities. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. Hopefully it does to all of our listeners. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of break down the effects of horror movies into three categories as much as we can. First is physiological, things that how it affects your body and what your body does and how it reacts. Emotional, how it affects your brain and your emotions. And then spiritual, how it affects kind of your spiritual life, whether or not you really believe it. There can be some adverse effects. And so we're going to start with physiological. And we'll weigh the pros and cons, the good and the bad of all the sides. And when we come to the end, hopefully you'll have learned something and be a little more judicious, show a little more thought when you decide to go watch a horror movie. So starting with physiological, this kind of gets into emotional a little bit, but I put it here because it's where emotional and physical meet. Mason, are you familiar with excitation transfer?
Yes. Okay. Excitation transfer is when I am really excited and then you're not excited, right? But my excitation transfers to you, right?
More or less.
Wait, really?
I mean,
because
basically,
I was making stuff up.
I know. So excitation transfer is what happens when you have a strong emotional event and then something secondary happens and you transfer the emotions of the first thing to how you think and feel about the second thing. So, for example, if you watched Jurassic Park for the first time on the day after like your mother died or something. In fact, I know of someone here who I know in town who that happened with like a certain movie. I don't remember what movie it was, but we were talking about it. And he just said, no, that came out like the week that my mom committed suicide. And so I don't like that movie because that's what I was watching when I found out. And that's a negative way that excitation transfer happens, where this negative thing happened, your mom dying, and you think negatively about that, and you transfer it to the second thing, the film Jurassic Park, and now you don't like Jurassic Park because you didn't like your mom dying, obviously.
Right.
But it happens in a positive way too, where you really like this thing happening, like you found out you got a job, and then you went to see, let's say, Amazing Spider-Man 2, which critically was not a very good movie. But you really like Amazing Spider-Man 2 because you're still on that emotional high from getting a job that you've been waiting for. And so you kind of transfer the excitement level and feelings from the first thing to the second thing. And that happens a lot with horror movies because of the other physiological effects going on, which we'll discuss in a second. You're primed and ready for a huge emotional event, whether good or bad. And so when the movie ends, you're still on that high and you're transferring that excitement, whether that level of excitement, whether it's good excitement, I'm happy, I'm relieved, or that bad excitement, I'm disappointed and I'm sad, I'm scared. You're transferring that to whatever happens next, whether it's, your circumstances, going to see a movie with a significant other, or getting in a fight or having a conversation with your parents. Like, you're going to feel worse or better about that depending on how you felt about the film that you just saw. And that's, fundamentally speaking, excitation transfer.
Right. So we talked about, would it be a good strategy to take a significant other to a movie that isn't a horror movie so that like they don't start having nightmares about you because of this excitation transfer theory?
So two things about that. One, I did, in reading about excitation transfer, I did learn about some studies done on couples going to see horror movies, and they were asked how much they enjoyed the movie. And so they asked both parties in the couple, and they found that in general, men enjoyed horror movies more when they were with a woman who was more startled, because they got to be the big macho man to try to defend her. Vice versa, the females felt like they enjoyed the movie more when they were with a man who wasn't startled, because he was that big macho man to defend him. So if you feel like you're going to be unshakable and not be scared and startled, you can take someone who is easily startled and and just build a strong relationship, whether it's romantic or not.
So it isn't exclusive to couples.
I would say not.
So like if I go to a horror movie with a very stoical person and I hate horror movies, we might feel a close bond.
Yeah, because they'll see you. You'll see them as like your knight in shining, your protector. Who's like, if this movie actually happened, they're going to be the ones fighting this villain to protect you, whereas you can run and leave the house and never get murdered.
So as far as marriage goes, horror movies are complementarian rather than egalitarian. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then the second point of that, you can also just go see a good movie that you both like, and then you don't have to worry about it. Like, if I go see my favorite movie, Jurassic Park, with somebody, I'm automatically going to like them more because I love this movie. And now I'm transferring that to this other person. Right. And same thing if we watch a movie that she likes, she'll transfer her affection for that movie more in my direction. So you don't need horror movies for that.
Right. So we wanted to talk about, moving forward, the other physiological effects of horror movies. There's actually evidence that suggests that people who watch more horror movies have less sleep and a lower quality of sleep, increased anxiety, risk for mental health issues. And that's pretty big time. That's something that you want to know whenever you're, because if you struggle with mental health, or if you struggle with a lack of sleep, that there may be a reason for it, or you may not want to go and see horror movies in the future. Oh, I had this story from youth.
Yeah.
So at youth, I was we're both youth pastors, right, Brandon?
Yes.
That's exposition for us. But anyway, I was talking about media one week, about how it's important what you let into your mind, and it actually does affect you whether you think that it will or not. And afterward, I had a person coming up, a specific student, and she wanted to pray with me. And she said it was about fear. So I was asking, like, what specifically? And she told me it was just fear in general. And I come to find out that she was really into horror movies and watching Let's Plays of horror video games on YouTube. And so I'm going home and I'm thinking, this is just what I was talking about. It really does make a difference. If you put that stuff into you, it can actually make a difference in the amount of sleep you get and anxiety, and that's no way to live. Mm-hmm. So it's something to really think about before you draw a conclusion about these things.
Yeah. And that all happens because when you're watching the movie, when you get startled or start to feel stressed, your heart starts to beat and your adrenaline starts to pump, like you're ready to either fight whatever's coming or run away. And so all these physiological things happen. And then even when the movie ends, your heart just doesn't default back to resting heart rate. And the adrenaline that's already in your system doesn't just disappear. Your body has to work that out by running it through, running your blood through your body, and just gradually weeding that out. And so if you're watching horror movies right up till bedtime, you're keeping your heart rate up and your adrenaline levels high, so that when you try to go to sleep, you're still ready to fight whatever the villain is. And so you just turn that off. And
something I don't know if we'll get into it later, but there is an element of, so with addiction, there's always escalation. So like if you drink a lot of coffee, at a certain point, your body develops a resistance to the coffee. The same thing can happen with adrenaline. If you're an adrenaline junkie, your body will develop a resistance to it. And so you need more and more extreme things to trigger the same response. So we might get into that later, but that's something you can see these things happening to yourself. If you are addicted to horror, that's probably not a good place to be. Mm-hmm. So it's something to think about.
Yeah. So those are some good and bad with physiological stuff. The excitation transfer, which is a little physiological, a little emotional, but then also the adrenaline and lack of sleep, lack of good mental health. Those are things to be mindful of. And I know maybe some people don't have those problems. And if that's you, awesome. Congratulations for being so stoic and unflappable, but that's not the majority of us. But going on to emotional effects, the first big one really is a really, really positive one is the idea of catharsis. Catharsis is that emotional relief when something finishes, something works out. When the hero beats the bad guy, you feel relieved because the struggle's over, the problem's done, the mystery is solved, the princess is saved, and you feel that catharsis, that relief. And we have these things in our brains called mirror neurons that kind of fire the same way when we watch somebody do something as would happen if we ourselves were doing it, which is really interesting to study. And so, like, if you like people watching, you like watching people play video games, your brain is firing the same way it would fire if you were actually playing the video game. Okay. And so, in watching these horror movies, you're seeing these people overcome these impossible odds and defeat the evil and overcome fear and anxiety and sadness. And your brain is firing in the same way that it would if you yourself, in their shoes, overcoming this evil and this fear and this anxiety. And so you kind of get this, when you finish a horror movie, when you get the relief of the villain being defeated, you yourself feel that same level of relief and release of all those negative emotions. Had a stressful day at work, watch Friday the 13th, part 1, Jason's mom dies at the end, you're like, whew, she's done. The teenagers, campers, the counselors win, and suddenly I feel better about my day because you got to purge all those negative emotions, which can be really, really healthy and helpful.
Right. And then let's see, we've got watching horror can be a way for people to confront fears that they have. So if you have a fear of, we talked about clowns, then watching it may be a way to stand up to that fear and overcome it. What do you think? Do you think that's a valid thing?
I think for some people it is. There's a weird in some of those. There's a weird disconnect between I know this is fake, so I'm not worried about it, but then your brain still kind of treats it as real. So like you're not afraid of Pennywise because he's a clown, but your brain can still kind of get the same release and relief from it. But there could also just be better movies to watch if you're afraid of clowns and you want to overcome that fear. Instead of watching a horror movie about clowns, maybe try finding a not horror movie that includes clowns in a more positive or neutral light. Or like if you're afraid of spiders, don't watch something like Eight-Legged Freaks or Arachnophobia, but instead watch Charlotte's Web, where the spider is a good character, and you can be like, oh, spiders aren't all that bad because Charlotte is great.
Right. Charlotte, yeah. What did I say? You need a clown in your life who will build rapport for clowns in your life.
Yes.
I challenge you to find a movie that depicts clowns in a positive light. Because I don't think one exists, but
well, you move on to the next part of emotional. I'm going to look up
okay.
movies with clowns.
What do we got next? Okay. All right. So I think that it's my opinion, but this is a very gray area in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But so as far as facing your fear goes, there's as a Christian, there are better ways to face fear than exposing yourself to it, point blank. In psychology, I studied psychology in college, which is why I keep bringing up psychology. There used to be these treatments for things like anxiety and whatnot. And what they would do is get you and basically find out what you're afraid of and then get the thing that you're afraid of and expose you to it in large amounts in order to wash the fear out of you. So if you have this huge experience, like if you're afraid of spiders, they get a bunch of tarantulas in a room and sit you in there for an hour with the door locked, the tarantulas that, don't bite or something. So either you come out and you're okay, or you come out and you're traumatized. And notice, no one does this anymore. It's because it doesn't work. So, but I do think that there's something about horror movies that demystifies certain things that you're afraid of. If you can find the right one. I just don't think that it is a reliable way, but we want to give every inch that we can here and be fair about it. Find the real reasons that we don't want to watch horror movies or that we do.
Exactly. So they can be decent ways to confront fears. So maybe not the most reliable.
Clowns Are Good, the movie. Tell me about it.
The only example that I could see that looked remotely friendly was a clown from Billy Madison.
Okay.
Which I've not seen.
Me neither.
Billy Madison's not a horror movie. It's just a dumb comedy.
Right.
But even looking at funny movies with clowns still brings up a bunch of horror movies. So they may not exist. Clowns may be a fear you're doomed to suffer with.
Right.
So
some people think that horror movies are pretty funny. And some of the badly made ones are. But if you think that the well-made ones are funny, then we have a completely different problem.
That's true. But anyway,
we want to talk about anxiety and OCD and things like that, and how horror movies can exacerbate those things.
yes.
And I talked about the last thing, so do you want to?
I'm thinking of another thing so I can address it later. So anxiety, we talked about earlier how adrenaline gets pumping and your heart gets beating because you're watching this horror movie, and that puts you in a state of anxiety, of high stimulus, high response. And it's just literally anxiety. And horror movies are made to make you anxious, from the sound design, which is often the worst part. If you watch movies about horror movies where the audio's not in the movie, like if they're showing clips and the audio's not there, chances are you're like 90% less scared, because the sound design is so good and it's made to make you terrified of anything, even like the Paranormal Activity movies. Just like having some intense music behind a stationary shot where nothing happens, you're just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And so it's so bad. If you have anxiety already, I urge you to stay away from horror movies. Maybe not cold turkey if you still think you still find them interesting and fun, you want to watch them, but definitely don't watch them close to bedtime. Give yourself time to relax and your heartbeat to slow down, the adrenaline to come out of your system. And if you have OCD, same thing. They can give you opportunities to face your fears and to overcome your anxiety, but it's much more likely that you'll just get this really bad image in your brain that you can't get out. You'll be sitting at your desk trying to do some work, and then you'll think, well, if I look to my left and out this window, I'm going to see Pennywise outside this window, even though there's never been anybody ever outside this window anytime I've ever looked out it.
That would be in character.
Yeah. And so if you have anxiety and you struggle with it, maybe steer away from horror movies. I know you may think they're good and they're fun, but they're just making your condition worse.
Yeah. And as far as overcoming your fears, whenever you're lying awake in bed, you are not thinking about the fact that the good guys killed the bad thing. You're not thinking about Jaws dead floating in the ocean. You're thinking about Jaws alive and well, which is why you never swim in the ocean. So
I never swim in the ocean just because, one, I don't know how to swim, and two, there are so many giant, horrifying things under the ocean that I just don't want anything to do with.
Yes, you're right. And one of the things that so Jaws, you said that Jaws drives you out of the bathtub as well as the ocean and swimming pools even.
Yeah.
Cloudy swimming pools. If they put too much chlorine in the swimming pool, nope, Jaws is in there somewhere.
Yep.
But I say the box jellyfish is what from the Discovery Channel is actually what drove me out of the bathtub. Because you can't see those things and they'll kill you. So and they're in the tap water. Chlorine doesn't kill them.
That's great. I'm never drinking water again.
Do you think there are any box jellyfish horror movies? Where are all the box jellyfish horror movies?
Well, fun fact, Mason. During our previous take where we realized we weren't recording, I did a little side tangent here where I did some research and I found a horror movie from 1966 called Sting of Death, about 5 teenage or at least young adult women going to the beach for some fun in the sun, but they run into this deadly, horrifying, I don't remember the other 3 other adjectives, but it's a jellyfish man monster.
A jellyfish man monster?
Yeah, jellyfish -man -monster.
He better be in the shape of a box.
It's out. Well, if you give me a sec, I can try to go into the IMDb page and find an image of it and describe it for you.
Once we get done with the emotional part, we should break for
shenanigans?
the segment. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Is there anything else to wrap up in the?
I think it's just. I think it's just that horror movies will actually exacerbate things like anxiety if you have a problem with it. OCD, whatever.
In general, with excitation transfer, they'll exacerbate whatever you're feeling, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah. So
if you're feeling anxious and nervous, the horror movie is just going to probably make that worse. If you're content and happy and joyful, you'll have a little bit of like nervousness during the movie, but when the movie's done, that previous feeling will be amplified.
You know what? Okay, so back in the day when I was less conscious about what I was watching, I watched a playthrough of Dead Space because
Ooh.
I wanted to know what was going on with it, but I was too much of a wimp to play it myself. So
It's
so
a
I
pretty
watched it.
terrifying game.
It's terrible. Anyway, I found myself feeling really depressed the other times of the day when I wasn't watching it. So I don't know if it could exacerbate things like depression, but those morbid types of things, they get me good. I don't like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did find an image of what the jellyfish man monster thing looks like, and
Okay.
it's quite horrifying. It's all practical effects, and so it looks horrifying.
Can you
I'll
can
send
you
I'll send it to you. Maybe you can put it in the video.
Okay,
Or
I'll
just-
put it in
Or if you're curious, you want to go see it, just go to IMDb, look up Sting of Death from 1966, and it's just this broccoli-looking thing that is a monster, and it's kind of
Yeah.
gross.
I forget we're not live streaming, so we can just edit that in.
Yeah,
Good.
you can fix it in post. But anyway, before we head on to spiritual things,
Okay.
Mason
So-
has done something.
Yes,
You wanna explain it?
I'm calling it "Give It to Me Straight," Brandon, or "Songs with Brandon." I haven't come up with a name yet, but Brandon
I like
has
give it to me straight.
"Give It to Me
Give it to me
Straight."
straight. It like would go well on a t-shirt, like with just like my face with like sunglasses or something, just stoic.
Yeah. So "Give It to Me Straight," Brandon. Brandon has a talent for reading song lyrics straight with a completely straight face and no affect at all. And it's the funniest thing I've ever heard. So I found a random song. He doesn't know what it is. He won't know the title of it or who's saying
I
it.
do now.
And he's just going to read it straight for us, and we're going to laugh at it.
How much of the song am I going to read?
You know,
It's only one page.
till you're comfortable. So
I can do all of it, and then you can cut if you decide this is going on for too long. In the
okay.
edit.
All right.
Well, cool. So I'm going to take a drink of apple juice. Nothing else.
Okay.
Don't do this.
All right. In the future, we'll have like sound effects and stuff.
Yeah, we'll have a sound pad and just hit a button and we'll play a jingle. All right. Are you ready, Mason?
I'm ready.
Because I want you to know that I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get no satisfaction because I try and I try and I try and I try. I can't get no. I can't get no. When I'm driving in my car and that man comes on the radio and he's telling me more and more about some useless information supposed to fire my imagination, I can't get no. Oh, no, no, no. Hey, hey, hey. That's what I say. When I'm watching my TV and that man comes on to tell me how white my shirts can be, but he can't be a man because he doesn't smoke the same cigarettes as me. I can't get no. Oh, no, no, no. Hey, 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 that's what I say. I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get no girl reaction because I try and I try and I try and I try. I can't get no. I can't get no. When I'm riding around the world and I'm doing this and I'm signing that and I'm trying to make some girl who tells me, baby better come back later next week because you see, I'm on a losing streak. I can't get no. Oh, no, no, no. Hey, hey, hey. That's what I say. I can't get no. I can't get no. I can't get no satisfaction. No satisfaction. No satisfaction. No satisfaction.
I like I can't get no. I can't get no. I can't get no.
I can't get no.
Also, baby better come back later. I don't know who baby is.
But nobody puts her in a corner.
No one.
I can't get no girl reaction.
I can't get no girl reaction.
Just One of the choruses randomly has that line in there.
Facebook needs to put it on there. I can't get it. Can't get it. All I'm getting is frowny faces and thumbs ups from.
Where's my girl reaction?
Man, where's the girl reaction? Okay.
Here's what we need, Zuckerberg.
You were very surprised when you couldn't get no girl reaction.
I know. I try, and I try, and I try, and I try. If you tried half as hard as me, you'd only try and try. I try and try and try and try.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough. Give it to you straight.
All right. All right.
That's enough of me giving it to you straight. Let's get back to the official business.
Yeah, we're gonna give it to you, Cricket. Hopefully not.
Anyway, spiritual effects. Mason, you want to start us off here while I take a drink and compose myself?
And the spiritual, I put these together kind of out of order, so they're kind of shuffled. So we're gonna meander. So as Christians, if you're a Christian or if you're religious at all, really, you have to acknowledge that what a horror movie does a certain thing to you. It's meant to instill fear in you, and fear is not something that you want to put into yourself. I tell the kids at youth all the time, we spend all of our time in our lives trying to get some security. We spend so much time trying to try and we try. We try and we try and we try and we try.
And we can't get no.
We can't get no. I'm sorry. We spend so much time trying to get the fear away from us. We spend so much time trying to get rid of that. You're messing with me, Brandon. And
you started it. You picked the song.
And then we go and we get it back on purpose. So we have to acknowledge that there's a spiritual effect that comes with horror movies. You're tacitly agreeing to letting something into you whenever you go and see something like this. And it's the same with anything. It's the same with music, but we're talking about horror movies today. And specifically, this is where we will start to delineate between different kinds of horror movies. Earlier, Brandon talked about how Jurassic Park is in the category of a creature feature. And so Jurassic Park is different than Poltergeist. The difference is Jurassic Park, we're talking about genetically modified dinosaurs, and in Poltergeist, we're talking about spirits infesting a house, right? And so one of these things is not like the other. When you're talking about genetically modified dinosaurs can't do anything to you. They don't exist. But if you are a religious person, many people believe that things that are depicted, even if they're not exactly like they're depicted in the movies, those spiritual things do exist. And whenever you mess with the occult or like the movie Ouija, it's probably bad news. Because when you mess with stuff like that, you create an avenue for spiritual attack in your life. This is the Bible, so specifically, and Brandon, I don't know the specific place, but the Bible definitely forbids trying to speak with dead people. Can you think of a specific?
I mean, all throughout the Levitical laws, it warns about it, and then some of the stuff in the New Testament warns against demons who appear to be good, and just dealing with anything with ghosts, demons, communing with dead. All of that kind of stuff is still just not good because people are dead. They can't commune with you. If you think someone is, it's aside from the one exception when Saul seeks out Elijah after Elijah died, or no, it was Samuel. Regardless, in the Bible, King Saul seeks out a medium in private, and that's the only time in Scripture when it seems like the person actually came back. and was communicating with Saul. Every other time that there's in history where there's somebody who you think is a ghost of somebody else, it's actually a demon pretending to be X person just to get you to be like, oh, cool, grandma's back.
Right.
And it's not grandma, it's a demon.
So as millennials, we often wonder, why is everyone so keyed up about Ouija boards? Well, this is why. Do your research, and there are actual reasons. So it's something you want to think about. There are real spiritual effects to putting yourself through these things. But again, we want to draw a line between certain things that depict the occult or demons and things like creature features. So like Jaws doesn't count because Jaws doesn't exist. As far as we know.
I mean, great whites do exist, but
they do.
Architects are fairly. There was one time during a man's small group, we went to Google and looked up things that are more likely to kill you than sharks, and it's alarming what things are.
Like vending machines falling over on you.
Yeah, you're more likely to get killed by a vending machine falling on you or by a shark,
or like cows, or
cows stampeding.
Yeah. Stampeding
cows.
Just
think of like per square mile, how many more vending machines are there in the U.S. than there are sharks on the coast?
I don't know.
Definitely your favor.
Many vending machines in America, yes. There's a vending machine in the break room at Hobby Lobby. I'm in danger.
There's one. There's one at House of Faith. Just in the and there are a couple of small candy machines that could kill a small child.
This one, as likely as it seems when you compare it to sharks, it's still unlikely. So do not be alarmed.
Exactly. And so another thing about horror movies is, as a chance, and this is probably one of the biggest kind of de facto arguments against horror movies, is in some ways they glorify evil, and if they're not glorifying it, they're kind of desensitizing you to it.
Right.
By exposing yourself to it, you kind of start to think this is less of a big deal than it actually is.
Right.
You watch any horror movie the first time through, you're like, ooh, that's bad. Ooh, don't do that. But then the more you watch it, the more okay with it you become, no matter how gruesome or horrifying or grotesque it is.
Yeah.
And that can translate to real world where you're seeing news articles about people being brutally murdered or drowned or tortured or whatever, and you're just like, nah, it's whatever. Some people can disconnect, like, this is a horror movie, it's not real, so I'm not worried about it, and still be logical, concerned people in reality. But there's still a very real and possible concern of you becoming desensitized to the evil things around you, because you're watching so many horror movies.
Right. And I think that goes back a little bit to the way that you can become addicted to things like this, and the element of escalation. Because you go looking for more and more whenever you get desensitized to things. So, I mean, as far as the adrenaline, if you build up a resistance to that adrenaline rush, you keep getting it over and over, you'll require more as time goes on. And when I went to college as a psychology major, I found a lot of other psychology majors, and there's a really high dropout rate among psychology majors, or not dropout rate, but like major change rate, I guess, because they go in and they're thinking that they're going to get something, and then they don't get it. Most of my conversations with people who were first year psychology majors, they told me that they were inspired by TV shows like CSI or Criminal Minds, and they were fascinated by the broken mind, abnormal psychology, sociopathy, and stuff like that. They wanted to understand more about that and see more of that, because CSI and Criminal Minds kind of makes it, like, it exposes you to this darkness and makes it look so, like, interesting, and that element of discovery is there. It's addicting as a TV show. So then people go in and they become criminal justice majors, or they become psychology majors, but it's not what they thought it was. They thought they were going to see the darkness face to face, but instead it's just another job. People, I think the same thing goes with things like Batman. Like, why do people love Joker? Because he's insane, and people love insanity. And there's something weird about that.
Yeah, he's probably the most neutral clown character I found in my quick Google search earlier.
Oh, really? I mean, yeah.
Because he's not horrifying. Like,
not all the time.
Crazy.
Yeah. So
yeah,
you can see, if you can see this in yourself, if you can see this fascination with darkness or madness, insanity or gore, that's something that you want to check. It's something that you want to be introspective about, because it doesn't stop at one thing. Once you feel that you've discovered everything there is to discover about this element of it, you move on to the next thing, and then you find something else, and suddenly you're not satisfied. I hate to make the slippery slope fallacy, but and it's not always like this, but sometimes that's just the nature of it, and you want to watch out for that, because it's spiritually and mentally dangerous. It's not good for you.
Yeah. So those are the downsides to the spiritual side of things. But on a positive note, there is an interesting
I love this.
kind of, there's an interesting level of morality in horror movies. As much as heinous acts are being demonstrated, if you've seen Scream, you know that there are there's 3 rules about horror movies. You never have sex. You never say I'll be right back. And then there's a third one that I don't remember, but I think it's the one related to having drugs. But basically, in horror movies, the people that die the fastest are the people who are having sex, who are doing drugs, who are being violent. And so there's this weird level of this weird moral code in horror movies where the heinous people die first, and then you have the final girl trope, where this girl who survives is this virgin who is moral and upstanding and does the right thing, and she only reacts out of violence as a last resort when her life is threatened. She's not threatening people on the street. She's not trying to push her own weight around. She's not sleeping around. Like, anybody who does that, when previewing and discussing how this episode would go, Mason mentioned how horror movies don't know how to end a sex scene except with somebody dying. That's the only that's like you'll be hard pressed to find a horror movie with a sex scene that doesn't end in somebody dying.
Yeah.
And even more hard pressed to find a movie where those characters do not die sometime later in the movie.
Right.
And so there's just this weird moral compass in horror movies where these people who these typically teens or young adults who are behaving outside of what society thinks normal for them. The ones who are misbehaving are the ones who get killed.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that they're promoting good morals by literally killing everybody else.
Right. And on that same note, I wanted to talk about the movie The Exorcist. And I haven't seen The Exorcist. I've seen some clips of it. And then what is it? The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Emily Rose,
is a pretty accurate court case depiction as well.
Yeah. So first of all, The Exorcist was made by someone who's a believer, which is not to defend the movie per se, but I did want to talk about how The Exorcist is actually a fairly accurate representation of how exorcisms go. Besides the fact that it's in an old house, the person who's being exorcised, they'll have to usually go to a place that the priest chooses. And I'm not Catholic, but it is difficult to deny the cumulative claims of hundreds and hundreds of priests whose job it is specifically to perform exorcisms. They have all these experiences, and it's crazy. And actually, there's a video by a apologetics channel called Capturing Christianity. I'll link it in the description. And he has a conversation with this Catholic priest who is primarily an exorcist. And they talk about the realities of how these things work and whatnot. And one of the things they talk about is that these movies are actually fairly accurate to the experience of an exorcism. So I don't really know what to make of that, but it's true. So that's all there.
Yeah, there's a weird level of kind of realism in horror movies, which is kind of what makes them so horrifying at times, is some of the things that happen or are depicted are realistic. It's realistic that you run in, you break down in the middle of nowhere and suddenly you're fighting for your life because you don't know these people. You have no idea what these people could be like.
Right.
And so it's it's often just real enough to really make you afraid.
Yeah. So, final thoughts.
Yeah. So one of the articles that's linked down below, it's the one from Healthline. It goes through some of the pros and cons of horror movies, and then at the very bottom, it goes through these tips for healthy viewing. And I wrote those down because they're interesting. And so if you take nothing else out of this video, and first of all, if you've watched to this point, thank you so much. But if you are going to continue watching horror movies, here's some tips to find a good balance between horror movies and good mental health. Number one, find a subgenre that suits you. For me, I don't watch any horror movies unless they're creature features, monster movies, whatever you want to call them. Outside of that, I'm strictly no horror movies. I don't need that kind of evil and fear mongering in my life. But I find horror movie or creature features very interesting because I like to learn and see how did they take something kind of realistic and make it monstrous, and then how did they overcome it? It's that sense of discovery. What's the creature doing? How does it do it? How do they defeat it? Like Jurassic Park, or one of my favorite of this subgenre is called Tremors from 1990.
Say that one more time. Weekly show.
Tremors. It stars Kevin Bacon, I think Fred Ward, Michael Gross. It has Reba McEntire in it.
That's pretty random.
It's a really interesting movie. It should be on Netflix, but
it is.
Find a genre that suits you. Whether it's if you want to watch everything except the supernatural stuff because that is opening yourself up for other things, you do you. That's your decision. That's between you and yourself and whatever spiritual being you believe in. Number two, set personal boundaries. Whether it's how many you watch, how long you watch, what kind you watch, where you watch them. Just set some boundaries for that, so you're not just going into the next point. Number three, beware of the binge. Binging is just not healthy in general, and I say that as somebody who, for the 3 hours before we were recording this, was lying on my couch watching YouTube. Just how I relax after work, for better or for worse. But binging, especially horror movies, can be really unhealthy. It just keeps your adrenaline pumping, your heart rate up, and it exacerbates those anxiety and sleeplessness. And then number four, take a break. That way you can level out your heart rate, get the adrenaline out of your system, and just return to a state of not anxious. So those are my final thoughts. What do you have to say, Mason?
I don't think I have anything to add to what you had to say. There's I think that there are two mistakes on both sides of the argument, as most of the time there are. One would be not making any rules for yourself and thinking anything is okay. And the other would be putting everything away without thinking about it at all. The only difference is the person who puts everything away without thinking about it at all is not risking anything except maybe not seeing a movie that they may like. While the person who has no rules is actually risking, heightened anxiety, being sleep deprived in some way, having fear remaining in their life, and even possibly spiritual attacks. So don't make either of those mistakes. Actually, putting it all away, that would be fine. But we can think about these things and we can draw wise biblical lines, because we have freedom, but not everything is helpful, right? Mm-hmm. And certainly the spiritual aspect of some horror movies is very not helpful. So, yes.
Yeah. So let us know what you think. If you have any comments, anything you want to say about anything we said, leave that in the comments down below. If you want to cover a specific topic, like we said at the beginning, FishMoney is all about finding value in unexpected places. So if you have a movie you want us to check out, a book, TV show, a topic you want us to cover, drop that in the comments below. Our social media are all down in the description as well. Mason and I do separate things on our own YouTube channels at various times and in various ways. I have Instagram. Mason has an Instagram for his YouTube stuff. So those are all down in the description. Check those out. And if you want to get a hold of us there to say, hey, what do you think about covering this movie? Or what about this topic about horror movies? We could do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah.
But let us know down below what you want us to see, what you thought about what you saw here. Anything else you want to say, Mason?
Oh, just that this whole thing is absolutely about finding out what's true about things and, applying them. So if you disagree with us, please let us know, because we don't want to continue in error if we are wrong. So if you think that we're right and if you think you're right and you're wrong, we don't want you to continue in error. We want you to think about these things. So,
we want to start conversations. So
absolutely.
Talk to us in the comments or on social media. But until the next video, I guess we will see you guys later.
Yep. FishMoney episode 2.
Coming soon.
All right. Bye-bye.